Hi there, Jeep owners. Today in your 2020 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Demco's Air Force One supplemental braking system. The Air Force One supplemental braking system is a truly proportional braking system that uses the air pressure from your motorhome, transfers it to the actuator in the cylinder on the brake pedal inside of your vehicle to apply the brakes that matches the proper output on your pedal. And what this means is the harder you press the brakes inside your motorhome, the harder it's going to apply the brakes in your vehicle. And likewise, when you just press them softly, come into a stop, it's going to be proportional with the brake inside of your vehicle here. The actuating unit here under the hood is going to monitor that air input from your motorhome and then apply the appropriate amount out to apply the pedal in your vehicle. This unit also has wiring on it that connects to a breakaway switch, so in the unfortunate event that you do have a catastrophic disconnect, the pin will pull and it will activate the unit using the air that is stored inside the unit from your motorhome to apply the brakes in your vehicle so it can come to a safe stop. The actuating cylinder here on the pedal is tethered to the firewall, and whenever it receives air from the unit, it will pressurize the cylinder and it will cause it to pull the pedal towards the firewall using the anchor point here. And to give you peace of mind when driving down the road, there's an LED indicator that you can mount on the back side of your mirror. And you can use your rear view camera in your motorhome to monitor this indicator, because every time you press the brakes in your motorhome, you should see this light up showing that the brakes are applying in your vehicle. This way you just got that peace of mind every time you hit the brakes to see that your system is working properly. And when comparing this braking system to others on the market, this is my personal favorite if you have a motorhome that has air brakes. If your motorhome has hydraulic brakes, then I would recommend Demco's Stay and Play Duo. It's a proportional system that is designed for those hydraulic brake systems. Now there are a few other options out there, as both of those units are your fully fixed units that stay on the vehicle all the time. They're permanent solutions that are always on the vehicle. But some other options out there are portable units like Blue Ox's Patriot. The Patriot's going to be one that you just simply sit in the floorboard every time you want a flat tow, and you just hook it up using a 12-volt power outlet, and it's ready to go. So that's a nice unit if it's something that you're just wanting to set up quickly and you don't want to have to do a big install. I would definitely recommend that unit. But once you've done the work to get this one installed, you are going to be happier with this unit here, because you don't have to do anything when you want a flat tow. You just make your connections here at the front like you would whenever you're normally hooking up to flat tow, and then the system just works. You don't ever even have to think about it. Now that we've gone over some of the features, why don't you follow along with me and we'll show you how to get it installed. We'll begin our installation starting on the vehicle side and get all the major components mounted up on this side so we know where to route all of our wiring and our hoses to. The first thing you're going to want to mount is the main control unit, and that's this large box that comes in your kit here. And we attach this just directly to the top of the fuse box here under the hood. I just pulled the two clips here, and that actually let this cover lift off. And all I did was, once I lifted it off of there, I just held this on top and I lined up the holes here, kind of on the sides, just so they're not in the way of being able to remove this. We can still easily access the two release clips here by offsetting it a little bit to this outside. And I just drilled holes here on the side where it lined up with this hole. And then I moved this out of the way, and then I just went straight back and drilled one going straight down the top. And that let me feed zip ties through, and I repeated that for the remaining 3 holes that this unit has to secure it securely to our box here. And once you've got those zip tied on there, you can see it's going to be nice and secure to this lid. It's not going to come off of there. I can't pull the lid off. I did use a little bit of silicone afterwards to seal up those holes, and I did it from the inside to ensure that no water can creep down inside of there and cause any damage to our components. Now that we've got this guy mounted up, we also need to mount up the breakaway switch, and that's going to be at the front of our vehicle. Our breakaway switch here we mounted on the passenger side on our bumper, and we just attached it directly to the bumper. This bumper here has multiple Torx head bolts in it throughout, so we just removed one of those bolts. We did have to slightly enlarge the hole on the breakaway switch to allow the bolt that we removed to pass through the hole, and then just ran that bolt right back where it came from to get our switch secured here at the front. This way it can easily secure here at the front when we need it. And what's nice about this location, I'm just going to unhook real fast just so we can see that when we're not flat towing, what we can do is take this breakaway switch and it'll actually push off to the side. And that way it'll give us a nice cleaner look here at the front and won't have any components sticking out. And then when you're ready to use it, you can just turn it back. We're now inside on the driver's side, and we need to mount our actuating cylinder onto our pedal. And you do this by removing the bolts the nuts that are on the bolts here on your cylinder when you get it. And then the other piece of metal right here on the other side of our pedal is going to be already attached to that. Just slide it off, slide your pedal on one side, use that piece of metal to clamp it around the pedal, and then reinstall the nuts. Then you can just tighten these down. And when I tighten these down, I use a 10mm socket, and I don't use any tools. I just use the socket in my hand and tighten it as tight as I can get by hand, because that is going to bend our bracket around the pedal to hold it nice and tight. But we don't want to over tighten it and bend our metal too far, because that can ruin the springiness of the metal, and then it's not going to want to hold tight. So you can see here, it's definitely not going anywhere. It's nice and secure. At the back of our cylinder, there is a cable that comes out of it, and it goes to a small anchor point that we need to attach to the firewall. And you can see the anchor point mounted here. I did cut out a small section of the rubber insulation using a razor knife, so that way I could have contact directly with the sheet metal on the firewall there. And then I took the cable and I just kind of made sure it was a straight line from the back of our cylinder to the firewall there. And I just used the included self-tapping screw and ran it right into the sheet metal there. Once you've got that done, you want to pull our cable here that we've got. You can see how it's fed through the loop, and it loops around it one time inside of the little anchor there. Here's the little loop kind of on top. So you feed it in, it'll come around, you feed it back through again. And that's what's going to hold this tight to our anchor. Once you've got it fed through, you want to just have a little bit of slack. You can see I can pull the cylinder just a little bit here. And then on the end of our anchor on the outside here, there's a set screw. You'll want to tighten that down using a number 4 Allen key. And when tightening this down, you don't want to tighten it too tight, because you can actually damage the cable and it'll snap if you go too tight. What I found when tightening this down, if I tighten down the set screw until it feels flush on the end, that's usually about the right amount of tightness that's not going to damage it, and it's going to keep the proper tension on our cable here. We'll also need to mount our quick connect fitting here for the air, where we're going to connect to our motor home here at the front. And I just used one of the bolts for the undershield here. I did have to enlarge the hole slightly in our bracket here for this bolt to re-go through. Then we just put the bolt right back where we had taken it out of. And then on the other hole here on the other side, I just use a self-tapper right into the Metter underbelly pan, just to ensure it can't pivot or anything, to make sure it's nice and secure. The last major component we need to mount is the LED indicator, and this is going to go on the back side of our mirror. There's just some double-sided tape on our indicator, so just pull that off and you can just stick it right to the back of the mirror. Just check for any sensors and things like that. Sometimes you have rain sensors and other things back here. You don't want to cover up any of those, so make sure it's just on flat plastic where you're sticking it to. From there, the wiring just routes up. This piece here just kind of flaps down, so we tucked it up under there and just continued tucking it underneath this plastic all the way down to the A-pillar there at the front. From here, we actually went up over the beam that's in there, because you can just poke your finger through and poke that wire. And then from there, we go around here. There's a plenty big gap and opening in the plastic here, so you can just push the wire in with your fingers. You're working it around, and then we push it behind all the plastic here on the side. Again, this just pulls out. If you don't need to pull out a lot, just enough to push the wire behind it, and then just do that all the way down. And we push it all the way down until we get to this point here where this panel is, because we can actually push the wire then between this panel and the panel right above it, and then we can wrap that wire around this seam on the inside. We can go ahead and hook up our LED now, so we're just going to head under there to the wires and get those hooked up. So here's the wires coming from our LED. There's a black and a red. These are going to attach to the reed switch that goes on our cylinder. Now, we didn't really talk about this reed switch much, but it just slides in this little black slot here on the cylinder. And then there's a little set screw that you use a small flat-bladed screwdriver to just put a little tension on it to hold it in that slot. You don't want to tighten this down too tight. This is just a plastic slot that it slides in. So once you get a little tension on it, just give your wire just a little tiny tug. If you can't pull it out of there, it's not going to go anywhere. It's just to kind of hold it in place. This reed switch has 3 wires coming off of it. It has a brown, a blue, and a black. And the reed switch is what's going to activate our light. So we're going to focus mainly now on the black and blue wires coming out of our reed switch. The black wire coming out of the reed switch connects to the red wire coming from our LED. You can see the two crimped together here using the included butt connectors. We just crimped them together. And then the blue wire coming off of our reed switch is going to attach to the black wire coming from the LED switch. And we can see the blue wire here. We did use a triple connector here, because the black wire coming off of our LED, that's the ground wire for the LED, but it's actually not grounded to anything. And the switch here also needs to be grounded for it to work properly, so the blue wire's ground for the switch. But this 3-way here also goes to a black wire. You'll get some extra black wire in your kit when you go to install them. We take this extra black wire, we crimp it onto this three-way, and then we just use a ring terminal, attach it to the other end, and attach it to the firewall here at the back. You can follow the black wire up, and you'll see we just attached it right to a stud that was pre-existing. We used a 13mm socket to remove the nut, and then we just slid our ring terminal on and then attached it back down. And this is the black wire if we just follow it right up there. And here you can get a good look at the black wire where it's attached to the ring terminal on the stud right there. Now the last wire on our switch is a brown wire. This is coming off of our reed switch, and this is what's going to power everything up. This brown wire right here, this is going to get power from outside on our battery. So the brown wire that you see here, I did route through the firewall to the outside. We're going to go ahead and talk about that now because we also need to route our air hose to our cylinder. And the air line that comes with your kit is a great tool for getting wiring routed because it's flexible, but it's also fairly rigid, so you can easily poke it down some channels and use it to get wiring routed easily. So this is going to go through a grommet that's located up there, and it's actually easier to see on the outside, so I'll meet you under the hood. The grommet's located just to the outside of your BrakeMaster cylinder here. There's two tabs on it because it kind of twists so you can pull it out. I went ahead and drilled a hole in the center of it because it's a plastic grommet, and that gave me a pathway to feed my airline as well as that brown wire through to get those inside. So the brown wire is our power wire. We just run that across the top here, just kind of pushing it behind any of those brackets till we get over towards our battery. The brown wire then just routes all the way across here. And before we hook it to the battery, we do have a fuse harness that we put in. And this is going to ensure that if we had any shorts or anything were to happen, our circuit is protected. I do recommend waiting to install the fuse into the harness until you've completed your installation. So that way, if you had any bare wires or shorts, they're not going to, or even when you're working with your wiring, if you're going to make connections, you can't accidentally ground it out and open your fuse. Now, on the other side of this fuse harness, you will see that there's two brown wires coming out of it. This one here goes over to our LED, the one that we just talked about on the inside. The other one coming out of our connector here, because we just kind of cut some of the extra brown wire that comes in our kit, use some for over there, and we also use some to go towards the front, because we need to connect power also to our breakaway switch that we had mounted in the front. Both of the wires from the breakaway switch we did route right over here, and you can see those both right here. We've got our orange wire as well as our black wire. The orange wire connects to the brown wire that we've got going right here to our switch. That's going to be our power side for our breakaway switch. And then the black wire that's coming from our breakaway switch is right here, and this is just going to connect to one of the two black wires coming off of the unit. There's two wires here coming off the unit. They're both black, and it doesn't matter which one you connect to the breakaway switch and which one you connect to ground. It's going to work either way, so you can easily mix these two up and it doesn't matter. So you can see this one here going to our breakaway switch. We also upgraded from regular butt connectors like we were using inside to heat shrink butt connectors out here, because that's going to seal up around the edges to keep out any moisture to ensure a long-lasting connection. You can get those heat shrink butt connectors here at eTrailer.com, so you can just go ahead and add those to your cart when you get your system. Since we're right here talking about the black wires, the other black wire that comes off of our unit just goes to ground. There's a ground stud located right here. There's actually multiple ground studs, so you can pick any one of those three. It doesn't matter which one. We chose this one. We used a 10mm wrench to remove the nut. We had crimped a ring terminal onto this black wire and then reinstalled the nut with the ring terminal slid on the stud to give us our ground. These wires here coming from our breakaway switch, we're going to head back up to the front real quick and I'll kind of show you how I routed them to get them here. And here's both the wires coming from our breakaway switch here. We just routed those through the opening where our base plate was, where the arm stuck through, and we just come up here, and then this panel here just kind of pulls to the side. So I just pulled to the side and stuck my hand up in there to push the wires up so where I was able to get them to make our connections up there. And while we're here, you can also see that there's an airline here. There's also an airline fitting that we need to mount here in the front, and our airline needs to run from this fitting to our actuator. So this routes the same way that we had routed our breakaway wires. And we're going to head back to where these wires are, where we had made our connections just up inside the engine compartment. This airline comes out right here, and then it goes over, and we just kind of wrap it around to where it can go to our unit. Now, this is the air in that we want to connect it to. The one right next to it, the air out, is the other line that we have that runs across, that was right next to the brown wire that we were hooking up for the LED. It runs right alongside it and goes inside, because this is the one that we pushed inside of the actuating cylinder on the pedal. And this is the fitting here at the front that we were talking about for the air line that's connecting to the air in. That is right here. And this is just another quick connect like on our pedal. They just push right in there on your lines. And you can see that we've got our cable hooked up. This is going to go to the motorhome here to get air from the motorhome to activate our system. Now back at our main unit, we'll now need to tap into the vacuum system for the power brake booster, so that way when the system activates, it's actually going to draw vacuum on the existing brake vacuum booster, so that way we have power assist on our pedal. Coming out of the unit, we did cut a small piece of the large rubber line that comes in our kit, and then we put a check valve in it with the black side facing towards the unit. The other side of the check valve we just connected to more of the hose that comes in our kit, and from here we just routed that across to the other side over towards our booster, and then this line continued running over to where we hit the factory brake vacuum booster line right here. You can see it heads off towards the booster down here. So what we did is right after the 90-degree bend here, I went ahead and cut it there, and there's another bend a little further down. I cut it right before that bend, so that way I had a nice section of straight hose that I had cut out. And in place of that hose, we cut another small section of hose, which we clamped onto our factory line. We put our T in, which the line that goes to our unit connects to one side of the T. The other side of the T connects to the hose to our line here. We cut another small section of line, which goes to our T, and from our T it goes to another check valve. This check valve then, we're connected to the clear or white side of the valve. The black side's going to continue on towards our engine. And then it's just another small section of hose, and we connect right back to the factory line again, and we use another hose clamp on there to secure it to that factory line. Now that everything's connected on our vehicle side, we need to head over to our motorhome because there's still some more we have to do to finish up our entire setup. On the motorhome side, there's an air tank we'll need to mount, as well as a fitting in the back to make our connection to the fitting we installed at the front of our vehicle. Our main tank we installed on our RV in one of the compartments here. It's going to vary depending on your RV, and the location of the hoses that we're going to attach into are going to vary as well, but you can use this as a guide to help you find the correct lines because they're very similar amongst the different manufacturers out there. As far as the tank, to get it mounted up, we just use 2 bolts that come included with the kit. They come with washers as well as lock nuts. So we just held the tank up in here. I made a couple of marks with a paint stick, and then I just drilled holes in the paneling right here. And then from the outside, I passed my bolts in. There's a washer on each side of the metal paneling, one on the bolt side, and also you can see the one here on this side. And we just use the nuts to secure it to hold it nice and tight, nice and solid on our panel there. This unit has 3 fittings. There's one here, and there's also 2 on the other side. There's one that comes straight down, and then the other one here is on a swivel, and you might be able to see that swiveling back here. So there are 3 connections here. Before we talk about these connections though, we're going to head to the very back of the motorhome because there's one more piece we're going to need to get mounted up, and then we can start routing all of our lines to these components. Here's the fitting at the back of our motorhome, and with this one we just used self-tapping screws and ran it right into the hitch to get it mounted up. There's 2 screws that we used. You can get self-tapping screws here at here.The if you need some. It does come with its own hardware, but it would require you to drill a hole and use nut and bolt. And on our motorhome back here, we didn't really have anything solid. I didn't want to go into the fiberglass. I wanted it to be in metal, so there just wasn't a good application for that hardware. But if you look at yours, there likely is on there as well. We also sell no drill brackets here at here.Com if you want to put one of those on, like your hitch or something like that, so you don't have to drill into the hitch. This just takes one air line that goes to it, and this is the connection here between our motorhome and our vehicle to get that air back to the actuator. From this unit here, from our connector right here, our air line just pushes into a quick connect fitting, and this just goes up to the tank, and I'll show you which fitting that this is going to go into on our tank. And this hooks to the tank where you have the swivel fitting. This is the only fitting that should easily swivel by hand, and it's on a side where there's another fitting kind of right next to it. There should be 2 fittings on one side and a single fitting on the other. So this is the side with 2 fittings, and this is the one that will swivel. It's almost, to me, it's the furthest one out on the side. We're now underneath our motorhome, just in front of the axle. This is the most common place you're going to find your brake relay valves. We're going to tap into 2 of the lines on here. We need to tap into our supply line, which is typically this large, thick line here. And we also need to tap into our metered air, which is usually a line that comes off of your main valve and then goes to another valve just like this guy does right here. The easiest way to identify you've got the correct lines is to first drain the air out of your system, and you can do this by just pumping your brake pedal until all the air is gone. Then come down here, and these are all quick connects, so if you just push in on these little collars, then you can pull the hose out, and then start your motor home. Start with the big one first, pull that guy out, start your motor home. If air pressure is coming out of there, that means this is your supply line. Air is trying to fill up your system because you just drained it out. So you can go ahead and cut that guy and put it in line. You will receive a couple different T-fittings in your kit. You'll want to use the larger one, and that way it's going to slide, each end is just going to quick connect and slide into here. And then we'll take our air line here, and we're going to run that back to our air tank. Now before you cut the line, you might want to test and find your other line first, because once you cut this line you have to commit to installing everything, or else you'll have an air leak, you won't be able to build up pressure. So if you just want to, you could just push this line back in and then pull out the line you suspect to be your metered air, which again usually comes out the bottom here. Pull that line out and then have an assistant start the motorhome. There should be no air coming out this line when the motorhome is just running, and you'll have to let your system charge up with some air for a minute since we just drained it out. Once it is charged up, have your assistant press down on the brake pedal and release it. When they do, air should come out of this line whenever they're pressing and releasing the pedal. You should not have it normally when they're not touching the pedal, but when they do, it should come out of this line. And if it does, you've identified the correct line. That's your metered air. You're going to cut this one and use the smaller T-fitting that comes in your kit to connect it in between the line where you cut it. And again, we're going to use some of that 1/4-inch air line that comes with our kit to poke in to the other end of our T. So now that we've got both of these connected in, they're going to route back towards our tank. So you've got your metered air, which is the small one, and you've got your supply, which is the large one. So now we're going to head back to the tank, and we're going to show you which ports that these 1/4-inch lines coming from these T's will go to. Now that we're back at the tank, we need to hook up our 2 lines. The metered air connection is going to go to the 90-degree fitting that doesn't swivel on your tank. And then the supply air connection is going to go to the input. And you can tell this is the input because there's even an arrow written on the tank here showing that this is where air is going in. And that's coming from our supply. That was that big line. Now that we've got all of our airline connections made here, we're ready to hook up our motor home to our vehicle in flat tow mode and test everything out. When routing any of your airlines, I recommend routing them to where they avoid anything moving, like your steering and suspension components, and anything excessively hot, like your exhaust. Whenever possible, I like to just route it next to factory wiring that's there because it's already routed in a way where it's not going to get damaged. To test it out, it's easiest if you got an assistant who can be in the motorhome to operate the brakes while you're in the back just looking everything over to make sure it's okay. You will need to start your motorhome and charge it up with air if you had just made those connections and drained the air out. But once you've got air pressure built back up, whenever you hit the brake pedal, you should see the indicator light on the mirror that we had placed, as well as see the actuator pull the pedal. So I'm going to go ahead and press it. And now that you've tested it out by having an assistant press down on the brake pedal, it's also charged up our system with air on the vehicle side. And now's a great time to test out that your breakaway switch is working. So we're going to go ahead and pull our breakaway switch, and it should apply the pedal as well. And I can hear the unit activate. And if we look at our indicator on the back of our mirror, we can see it's illuminated, so we know that it's working properly as well, because it has to have pulled our pedal to light the indicator. And that completes our installation of Demco's Air Force One supplemental braking system on our 2020 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited.